Hello, I'm Maciej Mikos. Welcome back to World Talks, where every word matters. For the 30th time already, inhabitants of Warsaw took part in the March of Remembrance to commemorate victims of German Nazi crimes against Jews during the Great Liquidation action in the Wasaw Ghetto in 1942. And to talk about it, we're joined by Stanisław Krajewski, Professor of Philosophy from the University of Warsaw. Good morning.
Good morning.
Professor, first of all, could you tell us more about the march itself and its purpose?
Well, the march has been organized for several years, and it's an attempt to commemorate the victims, which is very hard and really impossible to do, actually. But, to march, half an hour from the Umschlagplatz monument, which is the place where Warsaw Jews were gathered in 1942, to be sent to the Treblinka death camp, to march, to another place, is just a symbolic way of paying homage to those people. But of course, it's always inadequate, and I always feel it's not really possible to do anything that would be even barely adequate. Anyway, it's good that such things happen, and such a commemoration took place. And this year, yesterday, it was about 1,000 people, I would say, who participated. Some of them my age, some of them younger too. And every year there is a certain theme, and the theme this time was the rabbis of the Warsaw Ghetto.
Why exactly?
Well, just to have another group which we focus on, another category of people. Of course, the fate was the same as everybody else's, but still, I think it's important to try to remember the specific aspects of their lives or their fate or their tragedies. And among those rabbis, there were some mentioned by name, and perhaps let me mention two. One is Menachem Ziemba, who was a very traditional rabbi, of course, who before the war probably had never thought about military struggle or fighting with guns as a possibility for a Jew to consider. But during the war he changed his opinion, and he thought that in that situation, when the enemy wanted to destroy us, to kill every Jew, which became clear at some point, although not immediately, by the way, he decided to say that yes, we have to oppose with every possible means, including the armed struggle. And another interesting point that made by another rabbi was that the traditional approach is the so-called Kiddush Hashem, that is that you, in order to to express a sacrifice for God, you should be ready for martyrdom. Mm-hmm. So this is the sanctification of the name of God. But the idea came during that time, that tragic time, which was so unprecedented, that because the Germans wanted to kill Jews, so to become a martyr wouldn't really matter in some sense. So, although it was not a majority opinion, but still some rabbis said, okay, so that now we should sanctify life. Kiddush HaChaim, which means that to survive is our main purpose, which sounds, of course, quite understandable, but it was religiously expressed as that it is not the sanctification of the name, but sanctification of life, so that the Jews will survive. Because I would
sanctify life. It's, I guess, also the idea of the commemoration march, because it is dubbed March from death to life, right? It begins in the Umschlagplatz.
this specific march, I wouldn't say that. There are such commemorations, of course, when this is emphasized, and this is done especially by people from Israel, from the state of Israel, who would say that now we are alive, and despite the tragedy. This commemoration, maybe some people think that. I didn't really feel that so much. I think we just commemorate the victims, and we try to do something which, as I said, which is very hard to do. By the way, we still have no adequate language to express what was happening and how to call it. So, for example, what was happening on the 22nd of July 1942, the beginning of the mass deportations.
Yes.
But deportation is just not the right term, because they were sent to the death camp. So this was the process of mass murder.
Professor, if I could interrupt
Sure.
you here, this process of mass murder didn't begin in the death camp of Treblinka. I mean, Germans put hundreds of thousands of innocent people crammed in a very restricted area for a purpose. Could you tell us more about the reality of life in the Wasaw Ghetto in 1942?
Well, it was a closed district, so it was like a prison. People couldn't leave it. People were starving. It was unbelievably overcrowded. In 1940, religious life was termed illegal, so people couldn't even pray officially. Of course, they did, but in an underground way. All the institutions were completely controlled by the Germans, and of course there were Jewish functionaries who did the job. Some of them because they wanted to have a better situation, many because they thought that they would make it easier for the people after all, because somebody had to do it. Anyway, the situation was getting worse and worse. Some people were dying of hunger, but still, they thought that they would survive if they worked for the Germans, etc. But then it turned out, at some point, which was not obvious at the beginning, and perhaps not even obvious for the German supervisors, that the goal was just to kill all the Jews. And so this was then called, in the German it was liquidation, or dismantling of the ghetto. And this is, by the way, the term we still use, which is the term, we use the term, the Likwidacja getta in Polish, or the liquidation, the dismantling of the ghetto. But this is completely misleading, because it's
we
like
should rather use the term extermination of ghetto inhabitants.
Extermination is not that nice term to me as well. I think it's mass murder of the ghetto population. It's the annihilation of the ghetto population, rather of the Jews of the ghetto, rather than because liquidation of the ghetto would mean, when if we didn't know, that especially a certain urban project was in place, and they were moved from this overcrowded area to another nice housing estate or something.
That's what Germans called it. The deportations were actually called resettlement to the east.
That's right, because they wanted to hide the real purpose, and we are still using those terms, which I think is very unfortunate. Although, of course, basically we know what was happening, so it's not that this is a great mystery, but still we don't have the right language, and especially the right language how to describe the fate and the situation of the people who were sentenced to death for no reason, just for being Jews. And it was executed, actually. This death sentence was executed in a very efficient and industrialized way. And this is something that we really don't know how to call, how to relate to. We know, I mean, the culture, the Western culture, all cultures actually, including the Jewish tradition, by the way, we know how to call people who are fighting, the struggle, those who struggle, those who are heroes, but how to call and how to relate to people who are just killed in masses. I mean, everybody was killed, and this was the goal of the enemy. This is very hard to express.
It was the industry of that, and that's why, I guess, why the world, once it learned about the atrocities Germans committed, had to come up with some terms. That's when we first used the term genocide, when we first used the term Holocaust, and so on. Yeah. Because these things were unthinkable.
They were unthinkable, yes, they were, yes. And now the point is how unusual, how exceptional it was compared to other atrocities that are mass murder. There were many mass murders that have been in the history of the world. And the point is how, if we can say that in some sense it was exceptional. And there is a big debate about that. Some people say, well, not really exceptional. There are, other places where millions of people were killed, or many people were killed, and it also happened after World War II, as we know, in Africa or in Asia, in some places. Anyway, the point is whether it is an exceptional or not an exceptional event is debatable. The one, I think that when we look just at the sociological, historical aspects, we are not able to prove that this was exceptional. Because, of course, the method and the scale and the determination was extremely high, but still, there were similar things happening. But I think we can say that the exceptional character of this event is due to our perception of the history of Jews. The Western culture, the perception, not just the Jewish perception of the history of Jews. Namely, that the Jews are somehow connected to the Bible. The Bible is one of the pillars of the Western civilizations, even though now, of course, it's in a crisis and religion is less and less important, but still it's one of the pillars. And the Jews are, the Jews and the Bible is, just like two points, two sides of the same reality. So if we look at the Holocaust as the tragedy that happened to the Jews, and of something of a biblical dimension, I would say, something that could be made another chapter of the Bible, so to say, then it is really exceptional, because nobody else can be seen that way.
And it is it's also worth noting that Bible is designed to let people remember, right? And we should never forget about what happened in German-occupied Warsaw during the Second
Warsaw and Poland, yes, and not only.
And not only. Professor Stanisław Krajewski, Professor of Philosophy from the University of Warsaw, was our guest this morning. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching, and stay with us for much more here on TVP World. News with Don Olet is coming up next.